Or to explain the importance of the changes Xi Jinping brought to the Chinese political economy, we'll have to explain to you first an important concept, authoritarian institutions. So this is actually a very important contribution from a couple of scholars during the previous decades. And political scientists have been interested in this interesting phenomenon about authoritarian institutions and authoritarianism for quite a while. And one of the major breakthroughs was the selective theory brought by a bunch of political scientists in 2003. And so let me first explain to you the micro foundation for this concept and the selective theory. So there are a couple of important major actors in a selective theory. So first one is a leader, in other words, the dictator, or in the Chinese context, it could be the dictator alone or the Politburo. Second, the winning coalition. In the Chinese context, it might refer to the Central Committee of the CCP. And third, the selectorate. It could be the entire party. And fourth, the disenfranchised. In other words, your people who are excluded entirely from the political system. And so one of the major predictions of the theory is that if you have a larger winning coalition, if the size of the winning coalition is larger, then the public goods provision in that country will be higher. So in other words, you can imagine that if China has a huge winning coalition, that also means that you have lots of public goods provision in China. And of course, sometimes we think this is an important recipe for the Chinese economic success during the previous couple of years. So furthermore, we can visualize the interactions among these different actors this way. So this picture is actually taken from my previous book published in 2019. So as you can see here, of course, the disenfranchised, they were entirely excluded from the system. That's why they are put on the left-hand side. And then, but that doesn't mean they have no role to play in this regime, and especially in terms of how the dictator can sustain the stability in the regime. But more importantly, the core of this regime is what we call a selectorate. So inside the selectorate, one of them or a few of them will become dictator of the country. And then they also have to share power with the winning coalition. And that's because, obviously, in the human history, even, we have, of course, a long history of non-democratic regimes, but most of them are not just controlled by one single person. And even the strongest dictator will also need the help and cooperation from other elites. And that's why they will have to organize a winning coalition and share power with them. And so in this theory, one of the important conceptual tools is that they will create power-sharing institutions. And inside those institutions, they can share power with, the dictator can share power with his or her allies. But the thing is, inside the selectorate, not everyone can be a member of the winning coalition, and therefore, of course, you have losers inside the selectorate as well. So there are two important institutions here that we will continue to talk about in the next following sections. So the first one is what I just mentioned, the power-sharing institutions between dictator and the winning coalition. So these are people who will share power together in this regime, even though, of course, dictator or as a group might actually has a larger share. But the institutional construction doesn't just limit to the institutions among elites. So there is another important institution, which we call the co-opting institutions. So these co-opting institutions, they would co-opt people. Some of them are in the society. In other words, they're not part of the regime, but potentially because they're potentially powerful and might be threatening to the regime. And therefore, the dictator will have the incentive to include them in the regime. But that doesn't mean they will share power with them, but they will share resources with them. That's what we call the co-opting institutions. And also, of course, some losers will be included in that regime as well. So the entire operation of the authoritarian regime depends on the interactions and institutional setting for all these different actors. So with that in mind, now let me turn to recent important institutional term in comparative authoritarianism based on all these literatures, and all these literatures are included in the reference, so you can check them out afterwards. So first of all, I think let me just also mention one important background to you. The reason why political scientists started noticing this important institutional development in these countries is that they noticed that there are a lot of seemingly democratic institutions in these countries. So let's just take China as an example. So in China, of course, we know there's a Communist Party, but we also know there are two important Congress-like institutions there. So first one is People's Congress, right? And they don't just have Central People's Congress, they also have provincial level Congress, People's Congress, also county level People's Congress, or city level. The other one is a political consultative meeting. So these are two institutions for them to co-opt people in a society. And of course, inside the party, they'll share the power with each other. So the first issue that I have to explain here is that there are actually agency problems within authoritarian regimes because, as I said, no single dictator can control the entire country, and therefore the dictator needs the help and the cooperation from other people. And because of this necessity, it also creates agency problems. And by agency problems, I mean, of course, the missions missions are given by the dictator, and the other people, the other elites inside the regime, they share power, but also they share responsibility. And when they implement these tasks and missions, they sometimes can take matters in their own hands because they don't necessarily have to be monitored by the dictator in every minute. And therefore, how dictators can overcome these agency problems and have effective control over the country is probably the top priority for all the dictators in the world. And therefore, authoritarian institutions are created for this purpose. And in this literature, especially, I think there are lots of studies that have shown having these institutions can have following effects. So first of all, if you establish a good power-sharing institutions among dictator and dictators' allies, and so sometimes you have to create an authoritarian political party. So in China, as we just mentioned, you have the Chinese Communist Party, and that's the probably most important political organ in China. And for co-optation, they create legislatures, and the two institutions just mentioned, People's Congress and also Political Consultative Meeting, these are two important legislatures in China. And therefore, with both institutions, the dictators in China are able to control the country through the cooperation from the elites and also from the society. And there are two, at least, important implications from having these institutions. The first one is we found once these regimes have these institutions, they might survive longer. So they have a longer duration in history. And second, if they have these institutions, they can achieve higher economic growth. So I think the important lessons to take from this one is that, okay, if we in political science have successfully established these conclusions, so in other words, it's necessary for the dictator to establish institutions to share power among with other elites, and also to establish institutions to co-opt social elites. And once you have all these in place, then you can survive longer, and also you can grow faster, or having higher growth rates every year. So this means that what has Xi Jinping done to the regime has to be assessed from this perspective. As I said, so actually since Deng Xiaoping, kick off the economic reform in late 1970s, Deng Xiaoping actually, even though he obviously is remembered as the major engineer for creating such a phenomenal economic growth in China, but what people might have ignored is that Deng Xiaoping also changed China's political institutions and landscapes to a great extent, and so to such a great extent that he institutionalized the Chinese politics, and he created a very clear rule of succession in China. But as I'm going to tell you in the following slides, this is exactly what Xi Jinping has changed, and therefore one thing we should have in mind, after understanding the importance of these institutions, that if these institutions are proven to be important, and Xi Jinping has undermined the effectiveness of these institutions in China, what are the implications of these changes? Can China's growth model still be sustainable when Deng Xiaoping's political foundation has been negatively affected or even destroyed? So these are the implications we're going to explore in the next few sections.